Michael, good to be with you. Always good to be with you.
Always good to have you. I know that you were very keen on Mike Lee. I know you're going to soldier on, but before we get to Brett Kavanaugh, why were you so keen on Mike Lee?
Well, as I urged both publicly and privately, I think Mike Lee would have been the very best choice because he has the most consistent, proven record of being a rock-solid constitutionalist. And I urged the president to make that choice, and he made a different choice. I will say Brett Kavanaugh is a serious choice. He is, by any measure, one of the most respected federal judges in the country. And I fully expect that Judge Kavanaugh will be confirmed and will be confirmed this fall.
Let me ask you, Senator, you're one of the foremost experts on the judiciary in the United States Senate. You're the former Solicitor General of the state of Texas. Your legal credentials are in excess of anyone else in the United States Senate and 99.9% of lawyers in the country, myself included. Could you have supported Amy Barrett, Thomas Hardiman? I mean, of the four, Ketledge, of the four choices that were the nominees, were you pretty much of the opinion that if it's not Mike Lee, any of those four I can be for?
All of the choices were serious choices and have distinguished records. And I shared with the president my views on the pros and cons of each nominee. And that the advice that I gave the president on that was private between me and the president. But I will say all of those potential choices were strong and serious choices. And, one of the advantages of Judge Kavanaugh is that he's got a record of a decade plus on the Federal Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. The D.C. Circuit has long been described as the second highest court in the land, and he's got over 300 opinions that can be reviewed, and you can assess his record. And there are a number of areas where his record is quite strong. He has a strong record defending the separation of powers, which is a critically important constitutional principle that safeguards our liberty. He has a strong record working to rein in the excesses of federal agencies and excess authority for federal agencies to disregard statutes passed by Congress. He has a good record on the Second Amendment and on religious liberty. So there's much to like in Judge Kavanaugh's record. And then by any measure, he is one of the most distinguished and respected judges in the country.
Senator Ted Cruz, one of the things you mentioned was he has an extensive record. And unfortunately, and the candidacy of Barack Obama sort of proved this, in today's world, it almost seems better not to have a record, to have done nothing, because then at least you've done nothing that can be criticized. Neil Gorsuch had worked at the Justice Department in 2005 and 2006, and he didn't have as many documents to review. He was confirmed just 66 days after he was nominated. Elena Kagan, because she had much more extensive documentation, even her emails were gone through, it took her a full 87 days from start to finish. Do you think that the public record ends up hurting Judge Kavanaugh because there is so much to parse through, and we know that everything he's ever said is going to be taken out of context and used against him?
Well, yes and no. I mean, he has a long record in public service, so there are a great many documents that will be reviewed. And I think all of us know that the Democrats, particularly in an election year, are going to fish for any snippet they can find out of context, and they're going to vilify him as Attila the Hun. And frankly, a lot of Senate Democrats were doing that before the president made his nomination, were saying regardless of who he nominated, they were going to oppose them just because they oppose, at this point, any Republican judicial nominee to the Supreme Court. Many of these same Democrats opposed Neil Gorsuch, who after a vigorous confirmation hearing, there was really no meaningful or substantive criticism that anyone could have. We'll see how the confirmation plays out for Judge Kavanaugh, but I expect that we'll have a confirmation hearing in either August or September, and then the intention is to have him confirmed before the first Monday in October, which is the first day of the Supreme Court's term. It's
interesting. Senator Ted Cruz is our guest. Kavanaugh is married to George W. Bush, his former secretary. He's considered a Bush guy. He's a Yale BA and a Yale Law, which I understand is inferior to your Harvard Law degree. But, he did teach at Harvard, and interestingly hired there by Elena Kagan. One of the criticisms of this guy, and I know you're going to hear this, and I know you're sensitive to this, is that this guy's an insider's choice. I mean, he is a guy that's kind of a D.C. guy.
Well, look, and I certainly understand that criticism, and lots of arguments were aired out with the White House, and the president, I assume, considered those arguments, and he made his choice. And my responsibility as a U.S. Senator representing Texas is to assess the nominee on the merits and on his record. I will say personally, I've known both Brett and his wife Ashley for 20 plus years, actually just short of 20 years. But and I fully expect to support the nomination, and I fully expect that he is going to be confirmed. If the assessment were based on the merits, if the assessment were based on qualifications, he would be confirmed unanimously or nearly unanimously. Now, I don't expect that to happen because the judicial nomination process has gotten much, much more partisan. And in many ways, that is the result of the Supreme Court itself. The Supreme Court, by seizing issue after issue that are contested social issues in the public policy arena, and by trying to take them out of the hands of the elected legislatures and take them away from the people, if you have judges behaving like politicians, we shouldn't be shocked that we see more political scrutiny being applied. And so it used to be, if you look, Ruth Bader Ginsburg had, I think, 97 votes to confirm her. I think Justice Antonin Scalia had 98 votes to confirm him. That's not going to happen now because the court itself has so delved into the political world that, particularly with the far left base, as energized, as angry as they are, I think you're going to see a lot of Democrats line up against Judge Kavanaugh like they would have, frankly, against anybody, no matter who President Trump nominated. I think most of the Democrats would have voted against them because that's what their base demands.
Former Senator John Kyle is going to be his Sherpa through this nomination process. How was that decision arrived at?
I don't know, but I think it's a good choice. John is someone who is well respected in the Senate. He's a veteran of the Senate. He's a lawyer and a smart lawyer, and he's got a good relationship. He's well liked on both sides of the aisle. John and I were laughing that he's a former senator, and a couple of us were ribbing him. Is that like going to Alcoholics Anonymous and saying, "Hi, my name's John. I used to be a senator."
Hello, Senator.
But no, I think he'll do a good job. John is a smart, serious guy who's I think trusted and has good relationships throughout the Senate.
Senator Ted Cruz, as you stop, and I want to ask you to step outside the current political milieu, and I want you to think on a grander, more historical perspective. And we've talked a little bit about it, but when you look back on your one-on-one with Jimmy Kimmel, wasn't 11-9 a little closer than we should have expected?
Well, maybe. Look. A win is a win is a win. And I will say, though, I gave Jimmy several uncontested jump shots out at the three-point line. And to his credit, he hit a couple that I didn't think he could hit. In fact, at one point in the game, I gave him a wide-open shot. I said, "I'll tell you what, Jimmy, I'll step back and give you that shot. But if you miss, ABC has to put Roseanne back on air." And he kind of chuckled, and then he hit the shot and made it. So I stopped giving him open jump shots after he hit it.
So we don't have to deal with it yet. So did you end up liking the guy at the end of it all?
Look, I appreciate that he came. I appreciate that he did it. He didn't have to take the challenge. And I appreciated that he came to Houston. He flew to Houston. We did it at Texas Southern University and had about 6,000 people come out to TSU. And I also appreciated, we both did it for charity, ended up raising over $80,000 for charity.
Senator Cruz, hold on just a moment. We're talking to Senator Ted Cruz, and we will continue our conversation coming up. Our guest is Senator Ted Cruz. Let me ask you a question. Back to Brett Kavanaugh, the nominee for the Supreme Court. He worked on Ken Starr's team in the Bill Clinton investigation. Does that hurt him, help him, or not really matter?
I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. I'm sure the Democrats will dig through every snippet of anything he's ever written, anything he's ever said, and they may find some things there that they try to seize upon. That was obviously a very contentious time in our history. Now, a number of years have passed since that, so I think the sort of partisan wounds of that whole time have probably healed somewhat, and we've got our own fresh partisan wounds of the last few years. So I expect some Democrats to focus on it, but I'd be surprised if that proves front and center a decisive issue.
I have not read the piece, but apparently he wrote something for the University of Minnesota Law Review. In fact, Hannity had a quick piece on it, a blurb about it last night, that he felt that maybe that investigation went too far. So it'll be interesting because we're going to rehash a lot of the Clinton investigation through all of this. Senator, at the end of it all, if you put yourself not in terms of the conscience of the Senate, which you've in many places, in many ways been, the filibuster over Obamacare being a great example, but if you became sort of a Bob Dole figure, you become Mitch McConnell, you've got to get to 50 votes. With Senator McCain ailing, you've got Claire McCaskill, She's in a tough race. You've got Joe Manchin in a state that Trump won by 41 points. You've got Heidi Heitkamp, obviously a tough situation. You've got the senator in Montana taking out full-page ads, welcoming Trump to his state. You've got a situation where you've got more Democrats in trouble than you have Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski at risk of flipping. And when it gets right down to it, it's a question of counting votes, right?
Right. Well, we've got to get to 50, obviously. I think it is likely that we have to get 50 among Republicans. That if we're short of 50, I think it is very unlikely that any Democrats will give us the necessary vote to put Judge Kavanaugh or any other Supreme Court nominee over the top. I think the Democrats would so love a victory over the president, over Republicans, that if we can't unify our conference, we're in trouble. Now, if we get to 50, I think we could easily see 3, 4, 5 Democrats voting yes as the 51st through 55th vote. But I think we got to get to 51st, and I think we'll do that. On Neil Gorsuch, we held at the time we had 52 Republicans. We held all 52. So that was the conference stayed together then. I hope and believe we'll do it again. But this is going to be, from the Democrats' point of view, this is Armageddon. I fully expect for the next 3 months to see Chuck Schumer every day on the Senate floor lighting his hair on fire. And the media is going to scream and holler. The New York Times is going to scream and holler. And this appointment could well prove the single most consequential thing that President Trump does in his entire time in office. Justice Kennedy for 31 years was the pivotal swing vote on just about every 5-4 decision at the Supreme Court. And so this appointment matters, and it matters for all of our fundamental rights, whether it's free speech or religious liberty or the Second Amendment or the 10th Amendment. And so I fully expect the Democrats to spend unprecedented money trying to defeat this nomination, and to have histrionics. I retweeted something earlier today that had the scene from Ghostbusters describing, when they're describing what's going to happen, and it's the end of the world, cats and dogs living forever.
Right.
That whole scene. That's going to be the Democrats for the next couple of months.
Yeah, it is. We've got 70 days till 70, 71, 72 days till October 1st. The Trump administration wants this justice seated with the opening of a new session in October. Do you see the Senate able to achieve that?
I fully expect that we will. The intention is to confirm Judge Kavanaugh by the first Monday in October, which is when the court opens its term, and I expect that we will move forward on that time schedule. And I'm sure the Democrats will fight tooth and nail to stop it. But if we can hold the Republican conference, and I hope and believe we will, then we're going to confirm Judge Kavanaugh and do so in the next couple of months.
Good luck, Senator Ted Cruz, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you, my friend. God bless you.